Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, where we're taking a look at some of the clean energy issues in the upcoming lame duck session and the 2025 session of the Ohio General Assembly. My name is Rob Bradham, and I'm Director of Policy for Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy, or CICE. CICE is a national network of over 1,300 chambers of commerce and economic development organizations, including many in Ohio, highlighting the economic benefits of the clean energy sector. Our format today is going to be a moderated panel discussion. I'll be serving as your moderator, and we've prepared a pretty nice agenda for you today. We're going to try and leave some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions. If you have a question, you can drop it in the Q&A. And I'd like to get started by taking a moment to introduce our panelists to you. First up today, we are delighted to have Representative James Hoops. Representative Hoops is serving his third full term in the House, representing the 81st District, which includes Fulton, Henry, and Williams counties, as well as a portion of Defiance County. Among other committees, he currently serves on the House Public Utilities Committee and the House Finance Committee. He also serves as Majority Whip. Representative Hoops, thank you for joining us today. Next, we have Brian Dicken, who serves as Vice President of Advocacy and Strategic Initiatives at the Toledo Regional Chamber. In this role, he oversees the Chamber's advocacy and public policy efforts with local, state, and federal governments on behalf of its more than 2,000 members to promote a pro-business environment. He consults on clean energy initiatives with an emphasis on Ohio projects and serves on CICE's National Leadership Council. The Toledo Regional Chamber is our co-host today, and we are very appreciative of their partnership. Brian, thank you for being with us today. And rounding out our panel today is Terrence O'Donnell. Terrence is a member at the law firm of Dickenson, Wright, and chairs the firm's government relations practice group. He focuses on advocacy at the Ohio State House, administrative law and regulatory compliance, as well as policy-related appellate litigation. He represents dozens of companies, trade groups, and nonprofits before the state's General Assembly and executive agencies, with significant experience in the energy space. Terrence, thank you for being with us today. And welcome to all of our guests, too. We're glad that you were able to join us. We'll get started with the panel now, and I'd like to start with Brian. Brian, when it comes to energy and clean energy policy, what is it that the business community really wants or expects?
Great, thanks, Rob. And we really appreciate the opportunity to partner with CICE to have this conversation this morning. So looking forward to see where that goes. So I've been with the Toledo Chamber now for almost 12 years, and pretty consistently over that time, what we've heard from our members and other businesses around the state is we want market-driven solutions to energy, particularly all of the above, making sure that everything has a place at the table. And then just to add on to that, we know that our members want consistency and predictability in the policy so that they can make investments. And as we look into the future, we know that the demand for energy is not decreasing anytime soon. So we need to make sure that we've got ample resources to be able to meet that demand going forward, especially in a state like Ohio, where there's a lot of manufacturing and innovation at play that requires those consistent energy sources.
Yeah. So consistency and affordability, would you sum it up kind of in those two words?
Yeah, I maybe consistency and predictability.
Okay.
You know, we always want affordable energy prices, but at the same time, we've got to have that access to them. So if we can find a way to bundle all three of those, that's great. But we've got to have it in the first place.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian, for getting us started. Next question I'd like to ask to the entire panel, and I'd like to start with Representative Hoops on this one. With regard to energy policy generally, clean energy obviously specifically, What do you see being hot topics for the upcoming lame duck session and the 2025 session? Representative seems to be having some issues with his,
Okay, can
audio.
you hear
There he
me
is.
now? Sorry, I thought I okay, I
That's
I think the thing that we're looking at is energy that's reliable and affordable. And I think as we look at policies, even this past year and upcoming, is I think we have to look at policies that I mean, I believe in diversification, and we have to look at everything. We have to look at the whether it's nuclear, gas, coal, hydro, solar, wind. I mean, I think everything is on the table, and but we also have to realize too that we need that load power, and we also have to look at what's happening on the federal level. We're part of, as everybody probably knows, we're part of the PJM area section or region. And 4 years ago, they came in and said, "Hey, Ohio, you're sitting well, you're looking good, you're going to have plenty of power." And and then things started to happen, where the federal level, the federal government started putting in rules that basically where we had some of our base load, the coal plants had, shut down. And I mean, I'm all for environmental things, but I also think that we have to look at, just how much are we going to shut down? Because when some of the plants shut down, over the last 10 years, I was looking at it, and it's over 12,000 megawatts of energy has been shut down over the last 10 years. And so when PJM came in, they said, "Hey, you guys have to start looking at this because of, similar to what Brian said, us being a manufacturing state. I mean, we have a lot of companies coming in that we're going to have to start looking at where are we going to get this power so we can continue to grow here as a state." And so those are some of the things that we'll be looking at.
Thank you, Representative. Brian, Terrence, do you have anything to add to that?
This is Terrence. I would add, I think the representative, we're lucky to have him on this call today because he served in the General Assembly a long time. He's chaired the Public Utilities and Energy Committees, and has as sort of deep and institutional knowledge as you'll find in the Ohio General Assembly. There is definitely a focus on reliability here based on some of the more recent PJM reports, increased demand that we're seeing in PJM. Obviously, data centers are playing a role in that, though so is advanced manufacturing, and as we look to vehicle electrification. So I think that the emphasis on diversity and reliability together is important. And the representative mentioned companies looking to come to Ohio, Intel being a very recent kind of flagship example. A lot of those companies, including Intel, by the way, have sustainability and carbon goals. And so I think that's also going to have to be a part of Ohio's energy policy, is making sure that companies have access to the energy sources that they wish to seek. We're a deregulated state. We have retail choice and competition. I think that's been a benefit, and a benefit for companies in and looking to put facilities in Ohio, and being able to maintain access to allow them to source the energy that they need. I think also makes Ohio more competitive.
Thank you, Terrence. Brian, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Representative Hoops and Terrence kind of covered it. Again, it goes back to reliability and access. And companies are going to go where they know that they're going to get power when they turn the switch on, right? We always take it for granted, but there's a reason for that. And it's because we've done a good job of planning. We need to continue to have that forward thinking to make sure that we've got access to energy when we need it, not looking back saying, oh, I wish we should have done this, a year ago. So we missed this opportunity. So again, staying in front of, ahead of the curve is going to be really important.
And Rob, can I add something too? I was at a seminar last week, and they really brought some things up. It was put on by the Ohio Chamber. And the thing is, where we're located here in Ohio, we have all this energy underground. And I know fracking became a big issue during the campaign. But yet we have this here, right here in Ohio. And the question is, as policymakers, what do we have to do to move that from one location to another location so that we can use that as energy in the future? And so that'll be another issue that we'll be looking at, to be able to utilize what we have right here in Ohio, which I think is going to be very helpful when companies start looking around, because we have the water and we can have the energy and our location. And I mean, it just seems like there's really a big bright spot for the future.
Thank you, Representative. This whole conversation leads into the next topic that I wanted to talk about. And I think resource adequacy is a conversation that is being had all across the country right now as the demand curve goes up. And certainly many folks believe that an all of the above strategy is the right way to meet that demand curve. But I think we have to be cognizant that the demand curve is here, and that we need to be prepared, as Brian said, to meet that demand today. So Terrence, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about resource adequacy as we move into the lame duck session, and particularly the 2025 session.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Resource adequacy, it just, something about that term is sort of like overly wonky to me. And, people kind of go resource adequacy, and you got to think about it for a second. It's like, no, do we have enough juice, and do we have the lines to deliver it? It's just sort of like the basic whole purpose of the electricity system in the country, right? So you say resource adequacy, you kind of sound maybe like you're smarter than you are. But this is the issue that Ohio and Pennsylvania had a couple of hearings on last, I don't want to say last session, but because we're coming to the end of the legislative session, but earlier this session. And it really has resonated with policymakers, like Representative Hoops said. And I think both, number one, making sure, and frankly, I think legislators in particular often go right to the generation questions, because we've had some battles in Ohio over generation, right? We had House Bill 6. We had, are we going to have these nuclear plants? We actually have coal subsidies still on the books in Ohio for a couple of plants. We have a whole bunch of solar in the pipeline, and there's sometimes spirited kind of debates and discussions about the mix of generation. But I think we also then can skip over the importance of the transmission system when it comes to resource adequacy. And here in Central Ohio in particular, where there's been the most growth in the state, AEP has raised a flag and said, we think that we don't really have I'll say an emergency in terms of generation availability. PJM does still have a cushion. Yes, projections show that that delta is closing, and so there's a good policy discussion to be had there. But more immediately, AEP is saying we have a transmission concern, and that data centers that are now locating in places like New Albany outside of Columbus, AEP put a moratorium on new data centers. It wasn't because there's a lack of supply, it was over transmission lines. And there's a case at the Public Utilities Commission right now where there's sort of a cost allocation case. And I can talk about other potential responses that the General Assembly has that include things like energy efficiency, we just passed a bill on. There's a virtual net metering bill out there. We can get into some slides that I have, but I think it's going to be important for Ohio to kind of use the whole Swiss Army knife and every tool that we have available to try to support that quote unquote resource adequacy challenge over the next decade.
Representative, do you have something to add to that?
No, I think Terrence is right on with that. And here's one of the challenges that I see as we talk about these things. This next General Assembly, we're going to have over 20 new members. And as all of you are well aware, at least I'm learning every day when I get involved with energy policy, is how complicated it can be. I'll admit, when I think I know a lot about it, then something you guys bring up and I'm going, wow, that's interesting. And then it takes on a whole different direction. And the key to these energy policies is, making them, getting the members comfortable. So when they make a decision, that they understand it. And that'll be another challenge as we move ahead with these very important decisions that have to be made, I feel, rather quickly. Because when you look at, new energy possibilities, they just don't happen overnight. I mean, the regulations you have to go through, whether it's building another plant or even putting up transmission lines and things like that, that does take some time. And so I feel the key to all of this that we're talking about tonight is making sure that our members, our new members, and even the members that are there, because we're losing a few members this year or after this year that, really love diving into this stuff, and they're not going to be around, as the policymakers. Now they'll still be around, hopefully, to help in this thing, because I think we have to all come together. So that'll be another issue that we'll have to deal with, is just educating our new members.
Educating new members on a very complicated set of issues as well, right?
Yep.
So we're going to talk about the virtual net metering bill, and we're going to talk about community solar, and we're going to talk about efficiency here in a little bit. I would like to talk about generation versus transmission. The FERC has made some changes regarding transmission. There's a bill in the Senate right now, the US Senate, I should say, dealing with transmission as well. I'd be interested to know what y'all think the state's role might be in either of those two things, generation or transmission.
Well, I'll start off. I think, the election on the 5th, I think, is going to change a lot of things because of, who's going to be, in the White House, and also who's controlling the Senate. And I think, and hopefully, both sides, we can really look at some bipartisan issues, because it's just not Ohio. I think a lot of the other states too are going to run into this, because some of the policies that the federal government was looking at. And then when you look at you dive into some of the departments. I mean, you look at like EPA. I mean, who's actually making those decisions when you have non-elected officials that you don't even know who they are? And they, they're the ones that are making a lot of these decisions. And I think, we're going to have to look at that too. And so I think a lot of the policies are probably going to be put on pause and just kind of see what direction we want to go when we look at the energy. And that includes everything. Again, I think diversification is something that we need, and everybody has to be at the table.
Excellent. Brian, Terrence?
Yeah, Rob, I would chime in on the role of the state. One thing that's going to be kind of fascinating, I think, over the coming session or two or three, is this really almost a threshold question on generation, which is, how much trust and faith do we have in free markets? And can we get the rules right so we truly have choice and competition and kind of a fair market, right? And those are complex questions of, federal policy, regional PJM policy, and state policy. Or do we sort of throw our hands up and say, well, we're just going to have utilities in Ohio build generation and rate base it, kind of like we did, before 1999 when Ohio deregulated. And I don't spend a ton of time on utility CEO earnings calls, but I do see some summaries, and I know that AEP and First Energy, two of the big boys in Ohio utility, are both talking about that on their earnings calls with investors, that the increased demand that we're seeing for the first time in a couple decades in Ohio is an opportunity for them to perhaps get back in the generation game, because that could be a legitimate response to resource adequacy, right? Some of the things the representative was talking about, you could just say, well, we're going to have AEP build some gas plants. It doesn't feel to me like that's where Ohio is headed, but we'll see. And then on the transmission side, that of course is still a monopoly function of the utilities in Ohio. And I think there's a consensus forming that Ohio does need to improve and build out its transmission system. Probably going to do the same on the gas pipeline side. The Representative Hoops talked about, we have this gas underground. So I know utilities like Columbia Gas are going to be engaged in trying to figure out where to make those investments. But we also have to make sure that there's not gold plating and overbuilding, because let's face it, especially with that monopoly function, it's Ohio businesses and residents who are the ones footing the bill. So no easy answers, but I think we are going to see more energy infrastructure investment in Ohio. And the question about how regulated is it, how state driven is it versus how market based is it, is something that I think is well worth watching.
You're talking about specifically for next year.
Oh yeah, next session, I think that, it doesn't feel to me personally, and again, this is just one observer's opinion, it doesn't feel like Ohio's like headed to re-regulate. But if you hear those utilities earnings calls, they are actively talking about the opportunity.
Sure. I have heard that same thing. And I go back to the demand curve. It's already rising. Data centers play a role in that, but as you mentioned earlier, Terrence, manufacturing plays a role in that as well. And meeting that demand curve today needs to be a big priority in my mind across the country, not just for Ohio, with things that can be built reliably and quickly. And solar is one of those things. So let's, Brian, unless you have anything to add on that topic, let's move on. You're good. Okay. So you mentioned, Terrence, some specific legislation that you wanted to talk about. Let's tackle the first of those with virtual net metering. There have been some bills related to this. One, it looks like will probably come up in the lame duck that's getting ready to start. That's Senator Dolan's bill, Senate Bill 275, virtual net metering bill. That one's likely to come up. What do you see happening with that particular bill? And I will put a slide up that sort of explains a little bit about that bill, just a quick overview so that our guests will have it. Whoever wants to start, feel free.
Yeah, Rob, I mean, I'll just say Senator Dolan's bill is a virtual net metering bill. There does seem to be an interest on policymakers' part in behind the meter and in facilitating what I would call sort of self-help and allowing businesses to self-generate. And I think this 275 would be a big step in that direction to allow, right now in Ohio, you can self-generate, but the gen set has to be on your own property. And this would kind of broaden that. So you could put power on the grid and kind of net out the difference, even if the generator wasn't on your facility. And by the way, this includes things like if you wanted to do a small gas fired turbine, or, it's pretty all of the above in terms of how you can generate. In terms of the process, it is scheduled for a hearing next week. Given that we're going to have a tight lame duck session and the 275 is not even through either chamber yet, I guess my gut tells me if there is what I would call an energy Christmas tree bill that gets done before the end of the year, perhaps, emphasis on perhaps, 275 could be attached to it. But I'm not even convinced that there will be an energy bill before the end of the year. So there's a couple of big maybes there. And obviously, Brian and the representative, feel free to edit me as you wish, but that's just sort of how I guess I'm seeing it at the moment.
No, I
Gentlemen?
agree. I agree. Terrence, what Terrence said, I think the lame duck is, the timing is, because these do get complicated, and so I don't see it passing this time. But funnier things have happened during lame duck. But I think it's something that we'll look at in the future, the next time around, in the next General Assembly, because again, I mean, as policymakers, we're looking at reliable and affordable energy and consistent energy, and I think we need to look at everything and see what are some of the best solutions out there.
Brian, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think I would agree. I mean, I think it's going to be tight to do big things, but again, continuing this conversation to make sure that it stays at the forefront is going to be important. And again, I think this just feeds back into the conversation of all the above, and Terrence's favorite word of resource advocacy, right? How do we make sure we've got what we need and people can access it as efficiently as possible?
Right. And if I understand this bill correctly, it's really targeted at commercial users, right? So this is different than a traditional residential net metering, in that it really is intended to be used by commercial customers, i.e. businesses. So it's an interesting idea in that it allows folks to sort of build their own power that they can rely on, particularly businesses, your members, Brian. All right. And my understanding too is Senator Dolan is not returning next year, right? So is somebody else going to pick up the mantle, y'all think?
That is a good question.
He's definitely term limited, and so he's not returning. But this bill has some interesting support. I don't think the utilities like it very much, but there is some good business community support for it. So I suspect if it doesn't pass, this will not be the last we hear of virtual net metering.
Excellent. All right. Let's move on to the next issue. I believe Representative Hoops, you had a community solar bill, House Bill 197. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, the community solar bill, Representative Sharon Ray and myself sponsored this bill, and we were trying to figure again how, what other options are out there that we could utilize. And this bill, it's a solar energy bill, but they're smaller amounts. You have some of these the mega solar bills where they can take up a lot of land, And I know there's starting to be some concerns out there with that. And it's very important when developers look at those type of projects, on where the location of those are going to be, because with we passed a bill a few years ago, Senate Bill 52, and it gives more power, not power, but yeah, I guess power to the locals, where they have more of a say in where those projects can be located. And so it's so important for, the companies that come into the state to make sure they keep the communications open as far as, what, with the solar. But this is a smaller project, and we tried to figure out, okay, where could we locate these? And the projects, they're like around 10 megawatts of power, and to be used like on brownfields, where they can't be farmed anymore. The other thing too, old coal plants that were shut down, to put them on there, and you have the transmission lines already there, and or even we even put language where we amended the bill where you could put them on rooftops, and so that's what we're looking at. It's still in Public Utilities Committee. I think we have the votes to get it out of committee. Whether we'll do that or not this year, I don't know. But I think Rep. Ray and I have talked about if we can't get it through this time, we'll try again next year. I mean, I think we've listened to the utility companies on their concerns, and we made a lot of changes, on the bill, and hopefully we can move this thing forward, because again, it puts another option out there on the table, and to be able to use distressed land brown fields and things like that to generate energy. And it's a pilot project. We can only go up to 1,500 megawatts across the state. So put it in and see how it works in 5 years, and see if we need to improve it or make some drastic changes, but at least get it out there so we can, and see how it works. I mean, we have developers that want to come in and do this and sell that energy. And as we mentioned earlier, we're going to need energy. So that's basically what the bill does.
Right. And one interesting note that you mentioned, and we should have mentioned about 275, is the limitation of it only being on brownfields. That's an interesting point. Those of us who have done economic development in the past know that those sites often are very difficult to find new uses for. So this is a use that makes a whole lot of sense. Brian, Terrence, anything you want to add on that bill?
No, I mean, I think from our standpoint, one of the things that we really like about it, and what we've supported, is that it is a pilot, right? It gives us a chance to go out, instead of just talking about it, start to put these things in practice, understand what works, what doesn't work, and then refine that going forward, so that we can really create win-win opportunities for our communities, our businesses, as we're getting more energy onto the grid that we all know we need.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Terrence?
I just want to thank our friend Representative Jim Hoops for this bill. It's really not easy as a Republican member of the Ohio General Assembly to stand up for clean energy like he did on this bill. And as you've heard him on this call, he's all the above. He's talked about natural gas, he's talked about nuclear, he's talked about a lot of things. But to put this bill forward and not just symbolically, but really work it. Jim, I forget how many hearings we've had on this bill.
Quite a few.
Quite a few. I mean, this bill has gotten serious attention in the Republican caucus. I would do anything to try to get it passed this year. And if it doesn't, this is another one that I really hope comes back up next session. because I really think it could fit in with some of the themes that we've already talked about, like resource adequacy, giving customers choices, et cetera, affordability. So, this is just we really, I think as a business community, it's been good to see the support. But as the representative said, the utilities continue to express concerns. And so energy policy is, it's just not easy. So you got to keep at it. And I think this is going to be an example of that.
Well, and this is where we need to, really educate our new members coming in and make sure they understand, what this actually does. And I mean, it's just so important because, again, this is just another option that we can look at and generate that energy that we're going to need.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, both on this bill and 275. They both sort of help out quite a bit with that demand curve issue.
And see what happens, Rob, and this is what gets frustrating is, there are groups out there who will say, well, if we do this, it's going to increase your constituents' rates. And but they don't really give you the whole story on it either, and that's where it gets frustrating on when you have a bill like this. And so we have to. That's why it's so important to groups out there who want these kind of things is to sit down with members, the new ones and the ones who have been around, and really explain and be, keep it simple when explaining these things because it's just easy to say no to something when you don't really understand it, and people are concerned that the rates are going to increase because of this. So.
Yeah, that is a frequent argument against community solar, is that it will increase rates, which is not true, obviously.
Well, and it's not that it's not true. I mean, I think there's probably situations where it could, but there's situations where it's not. A lot of it's because if all the energy isn't sold, then you may have some issues, but it's like they always use the worst case scenarios when they bring up these examples, and that's not the case, because you're going to have people who put these plans together, and they're not just going to sit with their, sit on their hands. They're going to be out selling this stuff, and so that's why it's another option out there that people will be able to use.
Absolutely, a tool in the toolbox.
Yes.
Anything else on that bill? And Terrence, I think we heard the representative say that he is going to see what he can do in the lame duck on this bill, and if it can't make it across the line in the lame duck, think about doing it again next year. So.
No, hey, Rob, I just wanted to add something that representative kind of talked about. When people and businesses make investments into this type of technology, they don't want to see it just sitting there. And so they're going to get out there. They're going to make sure that they're working to make sure that the energy that they're producing, they're maximizing, because again, these are investments and they're not cheap. And so they're only going to make those investments where they think it's going to work. And I think that's the other thing that I think sometimes people forget. It's investments go where you're going to get that return. And they're going to work to make sure that they maximize what they put in the ground to get back out.
Absolutely. Representative Terrence, anything else to add on that topic?
No, we'll just move forward with it and see what we can do.
Nothing from me.
Sounds good. The next issue I'd like to talk about is, excuse me, conservation, energy conservation. Representative Hoops on one of our calls when we were setting up this webinar said that the cheapest energy is the energy that you don't use. So, Representative, if you'd like to talk about House Bill 79, what do you think the future of that bill is?
Well, it did pass, and I just want to give kudos to Representative Bill Seitz, because he's worked tirelessly on this bill. He was able to bring together, all sides, and was kind of interesting, getting the investor-owned utilities, the Environmental Law and Policy Center together, and really work out a solution with these programs that he's put together, with this bill. The bill did pass the House, although it was a close vote, and we hope the Senate will take it up, because again, as we look at the need for energy, what could be helpful is being efficient with the energy that we have, and make it last longer. And so, and I know Rep. Seitz is working hard to do that, and to try to get it past the finish line, in the Senate.
Terrence?
Yeah, no, this is a bill that, knock on wood, I think still has a chance this session. We're certainly going to push as hard as we can, because as Representative Hoop said, this bill is out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate. And if you're through one chamber, that usually means you're still alive in lame duck. And what I think is kind of cutting through with this bill a little bit is two things. One, Ohio used to have a mandatory energy efficiency utility programs, and the legislature repealed those in House Bill 6. One of the reasons for that was they didn't like the quote mandate aspect of it, that everybody was paying for the charge, even if everyone theoretically benefits from the savings and the decreased wholesale prices that energy efficiency brings. But it was just that mandatory nature really seemed to bother some folks. And so this bill, as Representative Hoop said, is sponsored by Representative Seitz, who was one of the biggest critics of the previous efficiency programs. And so this bill actually says if a utility wants to do a program, they can. They don't have to. So it's not mandatory at the utility level. And second of all, it's not mandatory at the customer level, because any customer on the residential side gets 2 notices of the program allowing them to opt out. And because this is a business community call, I will add that any business that wants to participate in an energy efficiency program and pay the charges has to opt in. So, if a business does nothing, the business is excluded and doesn't pay anything, but can't participate in the discounts and so forth that the programs might deliver. But the residentials are in unless they opt out. So it's kind of clever in that it ideologically anyway, you would say it's not a mandate, it's optional, but it can still allow utilities to put robust programs together that save everybody money, right? The point of energy efficiency is these things save money. You invest a little bit in smart thermostats, for example, and it reaps a lot of benefits over the life of the asset. And there's a lot of good science behind that, like an overwhelming amount of science behind that. So that's why we like 79. What is a newer argument for the bill goes back to resource adequacy. There's a company I know called Renew Home. It came out of Google Nest, and they've put some data together about just the sheer number of megawatts that could be saved from a good, robust smart thermostat program. And it's hundreds and hundreds of megawatts. It's literally like building a gas plant. And again, voluntary, no one has to get coerced into participation, but, a program that could deliver hundreds and hundreds of megawatts, especially at peak, and help avoid some of the sort of rolling brownout scenarios that we've seen in other parts of the country and other states. I think that might resonate with policymakers as they, part of our theme here is another tool in the toolbox. So we think 79 is a great tool in the toolbox. And I noticed that it was not put on for committee hearing next week in the Senate, but the Senate has several other weeks of session before the end of the year. And so 79 is one that we're going to watch closely. And I know there's a lot of advocacy going on for 79.
Excellent. Brian, anything you want to add on that topic? All right. I should have mentioned, I believe Senate Bill 275 is scheduled to have a hearing next week. We didn't talk about that. So it will be having a hearing next week is my understanding. We've got about 15 minutes left. There is one issue that we have to talk about before we leave, and that's permitting and siting, particularly as it pertains to solar. I know that's been a big issue in Ohio. It's been a big issue in other states as well. I'd be interested to know whether y'all think that that is something that might come up in the 2025 session.
Well, I think, we did a lot with Senate Bill 52 in the last General Assembly. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's so important when developers, work with the local people that they really communicate, what they're doing, and also listen to local people, because I know there was a couple projects out there where people were adamant, because of where it was located. These projects, I know I have a few in my district that are going to be very beneficial to the school districts, and, the local government entities. And so I think it's just the communication part. What 52 did too was, it gave the locals more authority, more participation in it. And so I think it's going to be very, very important that you continue to communicate, because I think if it's done right, it can be very beneficial to people. The interesting discussion when I was chairing the public utilities was land rights, and you had people on both sides of the issue, and they brought up land rights. And I guess what's the definition of land rights? And, on one side, you have the people who actually own the land, who want to put that project on their land, that they should have the rights to do what they want to with their land. But then you had people who were around the project who said, wait a minute, we should have a say in this too, because what happens on that piece of land could affect what happens on our land. And so, that was a hotly discussed topic during that time. So I don't know of anything that's, that we're going to do more of. I think one of the big issues now is projects that are out there, the debate on whether they're grandfathered in, before 52 was passed. And I know there's a couple projects who should be grandfathered in. And I think there's even one before the Supreme Court for them to determine what's the definition of grandfathering. So, and I'm not sure where that's at right now. So,
Terrence?
Yeah, no, citing has been a big issue for a while, because we had sort of pure state level citing in Ohio. I know different jurisdictions in different states do that differently. Some places it's at the local level. In Ohio, it was at the state level. We kind of always thought that was an asset, because it's when you didn't have to go through local zoning, there was tended to be a little more certainty. And Senate Bill 52, I think, was a response to some controversial projects where communities just basically said, we are very strongly opposed to having these projects in our area. 52 allowed wind and solar to be essentially subject to local thumbs up or thumbs down. And the way it works is, and it was sort of designed to thread the needle here, where developers didn't have to spend a whole bunch of money to try to bring a fully baked project to a county and only to be told no. So we have a write-up on this, but the way 52 works is you basically just tell the county, this is where I want to develop, and this is, I want it to be a solar or wind project. This is where, here's the outside footprint. And the county has, I forget Representative Hoops, if it was like 60 days or 90 days, but it's a pretty narrow time frame to respond to you. And if the county doesn't do anything, then you're approved to go on to the State Power Siting Board, sort of just as it always was. But it adds this local level of control. And I think that we're seeing continued development. We're seeing it in areas that are supportive of projects. We're seeing some areas where I think developers are just not going to go. And I would say one of the things about 52 that was maybe the most difficult was we also told counties that they could just preemptively and proactively close down their county to utility scale renewables. And of 88 counties in Ohio, something like 30 or 32 have done that. And I personally think that's a little unfortunate. I would have rather have seen these decisions made on a case-by-case basis. But that's not what's in 52, and that's not what's happening. The last thing I want to piggyback on Representative Hoops is there was a very robust grandfathering provision. So any project that was filed with PJM before 52 took effect was not subject to 52. And the Power Siting Board has been a little bit, I would say, extra deferential to counties, even for grandfathered projects. And that's what's pending in front of the Ohio Supreme Court right now, is our grandfathered projects. Can the siting board deny the project and say that, well, we don't think the county wanted it? Because, my opinion, that was the whole point of grandfathering, was you didn't go for a county level review. So the siting board has a little bit backdoored that. But then again, the siting board has broad authority under some of their statutes to find out, and determine what's in the public interest. So we'll see some cases in 2025 that give us clarity on that. And I suppose depending on the outcome of those cases, we could see more legislation or not. But in the meantime, developers, I think, are heeding Representative Hoop's advice, which is really work closely at the local level to try to get your projects with some support, because otherwise you're not going to be able to build them.
And kind of one thing I wanted to talk about, so we didn't miss it, is I think the key to solar and wind for the future is the technology that that they're working on to store that energy, with batteries. I think that's going to be something, if there's a breakthrough with that, I think that's really going to help, because right now, they're working on it, but it's not there yet. And so I think that's something that really needs to be there for this to, to continue the progress on wind and solar.
Yeah, batteries certainly help in that regard, and that technology has come an awfully long way. Brian, anything you wanted to add on that topic?
No, I mean, I think I just wanted to say thank you to Representative Hoops for a lot of the work that he's done on this issue, and help make that a little bit better and less onerous from where we were initially on 52. I think going forward, I think there's going to be some real unintended consequences as some of these counties have preemptively said no. just from a funding of with local government and those aspects. So I think we just need to continue to educate all of our officials at the local and the state. And as Representative Hoops said, keep those robust channels of communications open, right? The more people understand, the less likely they are to get scared of something or have concerns. And so keeping an open mind within those officials is going to be key as we go forward.
Absolutely. We just have literally a couple of minutes left. Brian, Terrence, I'm interested. It seems now more than ever, it's more appropriate for business to care about energy policy than it ever has been in the past. Do you see the business community stepping up on energy policy issues coming up in the next couple of years, and in a way maybe they have not in the past?
Brian, you want to take that as the business community first? I can follow on.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think over the past couple of years, we've definitely seen greater engagement from the business community, probably in a more coordinated way than we had seen previously. There was a lot of one-off conversations. We're starting to see people come together, conversations that are taking place. CICE has been a great advocate in pulling the business community together to have some of those conversations, getting in front of people to make sure they've got the right and accurate information on these resources is critical, right? And so the more we can get out there and talk about the value on both sides of the equation when we talk on these investments, making sure that we've got coordinated efforts to access that energy as we look at the growth and the demand. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to continue to see more and more engagement to make sure those pieces are in place before we actually need them.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. We have 3 minutes. I just want to add, the Ohio Chamber had an event yesterday, sort of an election recap, and the next Senate president is from actually Representative Hoop's neck of the woods in Ohio. And he said that he thinks the single most important issue facing Ohio right now is energy, and that they are going to be taking this up early next year. And he said that at the Ohio Chamber event. So I think that was, if nothing else, an invitation to participate and engage. So I'm glad that that's what all of you are doing here today.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this today. Representative Hoops, the last word, 1 minute, is going to be yours, sir.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And I think Terrence and Brian are right on, Rob, with, be engaged. As I mentioned earlier, we have new members coming in, and we have members who have been around. And energy is a complicated subject, and it's just people are just used to turning on the light switch, and or it's a switch, and the lights come on. And what I don't ever want to see, because we've talked about this as policymakers, if we ever get a polar vortex, or a heated summer, to start having some brownouts, that's not going to be good. And I never want to see something happen in Ohio that happened in Texas a few years ago. So we have to work together, and we have to work bipartisanly too, because I think one of the things that we do a disservice to the businesses is we're not consistent, and it's kind of tough for utilities and groups out there to do something, because they're wondering, okay, when there's a change in the policy, in politics, is that going to change everything and undo everything we did? So we have to be more consistent too, and responsible and look ahead to the future when we look at these policies.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's going to have to do it for us today. Panelists, thank you, gentlemen. Once again, thank you to the Toledo Regional Chamber for being our co-host today. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope you found it informative. You will receive a recording of this webinar as well as a survey. And I wish you all a happy Friday and a great afternoon.